Keba Tempora, Jujin, Tempora, Sungwa, Sungme, Tempa, Nige, Rangi, Chide, Kamde, Yuri, Barjurupa, Molam, Seba, Dishin, Chavarashu, Omi, Niso, Kuni, Rabjuni, Kadi, Duni, Kesa, Sajigi, Mawa, Samli, Diru, Tribeko, Nazi, Di, Mola, Dadrushu, Kewa, Jambi, Kesa, Nizini, Kaza, Sangi, Drupa, Nizonde, Nazi, Bargi, Tribi, Suchede, Karma, Pai, Mola, Dadrushu, Kidin, Digi, Chisi, Sombada, Tesan, Gombe, Jawa, Kimbeshi, Deva, Tindan, Siri, Nemeso, Dego, Dume, Kumbara, Manjuruchi, Jurba, Namde, Bichan, Jimmy, Jin, Tsinse, Newa, Koda, Baye, Ba, Shinde, Chinre, Siki, Chinle, Karma, Baye, Demba, Geji, Sho, Choji, Shindo, Duson, Sanje, Ki, Chinle, Mali, Trube, Karma, Ba, Shija, Jaso, Shija, Tade, Dende, Tashi, Dende, Chungjurochi, Dushe, Lege, Keve, Chinle, Ba, Karma, Bade, Dembe, Nimbo, Ne, Chodra, Quincha, Chabji, Jumechi, Taba, Rabbe, Peve, Tashi, Shui, Kunjo, Sungye, Demba, Da, Sangye, Da, Chancho, Semba, Time, Jingye, Jingye, Labda, Sonye, Yonso, Zove, Mata, Chembo, Da, Chugye, Inambara, Daje, Samye, Mechabe, Tolge, Dede, Shindo, Druba, Joji.
Hola, Dog
We will begin with the opening prayers.
Sanje,
Now you can all hear me, right? Okay. I'd like to offer all the lamas, chulkus, and spiritual friends, all of the members of the Noble Sangha, in particular, all of the students from the nunneries, all of the nuns, and all the Dharma friends with faith from East and West, and everyone. I would like to offer you all my greetings and my wishes that you are well. Today is the 11th day of the Audio Chamber Spring Teachings. What I'd like to speak about you today is the 19th good deed from MIKYÖ DORJE's Autobiographical versus Good Deeds. Now, according to the outline from the commentary on the good deeds by the attendant Sanjay Paldrup, so here, there's the methods for meditating on relative bodhicitta, the exchanging self for others in meditation, taking diversity's path in post-meditation. And in terms of the second, taking diversity's path in 10 missions, there are 10 different subtopics. And so among these, we've got up to the eighth good deed. And so what we'll speak about today is the 9th, taking hostility as the path. And then tomorrow I'll probably speak about the taking greed as that path. That's probably what we'll do. But first, now the stanza for the taking hostility as the path. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, first of all, before I speak about taking hostility as the path, I should probably give a bit of a conclusion to what I was speaking about with the eighth subtopic, which is taking things going well or badly as the path. And then I'll speak about the 9th, taking hostility as the path. So yesterday when I was speaking about the 8th, there are 3 different points. And the third of these 3 points was and that the times when things are going well and badly are the best opportunities for us to practice. And so among the 2, when things are going well and when things are going badly, I spoke about how when things are going well and everything is working out well for you, how to take that as the path. So today, when we have difficulties in our paths, when we have hard times in our lifetimes, so what do we do in such times? That is the topic I would like to speak about next. As I said the other day, even when we're in really bad times in our life, they're like I think we have to think of these as like the best opportunities for us to gather merit, as I explained the other day, right? For example, if water flows downhill, water does not flow uphill, right? Similarly, merit as well. When you are in a low place, when you're in a bad situation, in a low place, you have more opportunities to gather the accumulation of merit. And so you can have this hope for that, or this is the situation that it is. Like, for example, if you're making investments, if you're making an investment, you buy a small investment, and later then the value will grow exponentially, right? That's what happens, right? These days, you have Bitcoin and other electronic currencies, right? So in the past, those are really, really cheap. But now, if you've got a single, they used to be really cheap, and now a single unit of Bitcoin is like tens of thousands of dollars. Likewise, during the times when we're experiencing terrible physical and mental suffering during the worst times in our lives, but because of that suffering, we can enhance our practice or improve it. To give an example, when we're usually normal times when we're feeling healthy and feeling good, there's the Mani mantras we recite during those times. And then the manis we recite when we have illness and suffering. The manis we're reciting are the same times, but the feelings and experiences at those times are different. And so So when you have really, really intense prayers and you're in a real crisis, then you're going to focus yourself more. When you're in a crisis, you focus yourself more, right? And so when you focus your money and you pray intensely, the way you think, your state of mind is different than it is in your ordinary time. It's a more powerful, it's a more stronger state of mind. And so for that reason, even though the manis we're reciting are the same, because our state of mind is different, the benefits and power that we receive, the results that come, are naturally not the same. They're quite different, actually. So for this reason, when we are experiencing suffering, we shouldn't be oppressed by that suffering. But if we can continue to practice, then our practice can improve like a bird taking flight. It's like it improves more than normal. Now, when I'm saying things like this, I think it's good for us to think like this. Like, for example, when you have a headache or a stomach ache, you can't really focus well, right? You can't think well, right? And you're unable to write mantras, and you're unable to recite prayers. This is what happens, right? But if we compare to those sort of times, like at some time in the future, when we come, there's a time when we're going to die, and we're at the time of death, and we see there's like this terrifying pitch dark darkness coming before us to get us. And what are we going to do? In comparison to having a headache or a stomach, those are times when we can't do that. During those times, we are unable to focus our minds. So when we're focusing this like terrifying blackness waiting for us, and that's enveloping us completely, what are we going to do then? In comparison to the pain and fear at the time of death, most of our present sufferings can hardly even be considered suffering. So the pain and fear at the time of death are extremely strong, and the reason for it is that the reason we've never experienced it. Now, we don't really experience it, but if you look at it, see that we can see that it seems like there's a lot of pain and fear at the time of death. We can see this. So now, during the times we encounter suffering, or when things have misfortune, when things don't go as we wish, if we are able to practice well during those times, these are like preparations or training for facing the suffering we will face that we'll encounter at the time of death. So in brief, all the sufferings and hardships we experience now, we need to recognize them as opportunities to practice and to train in improving our mind. If we do that, that'll really help us and improve our practice. The reason is that when improvement in our practice, as I said before, is that when you're having terrible suffering, and when you're having like your body and mind are like really tormented, if during those times you're able to continue to move forward, and only then will your practice really improve. If in your whole life, there are many different things. There are many changes and things. It's often like there are hurricanes or tornadoes, and so these are opportunities for our way of thinking to become broader and our thinking to become clearer, and for us to be able to think more about the long term. This is what happens, right? And so for this reason, no matter how many difficulties and hardships we experience in our life, we need to recognize them and think what we need to think about. What can we learn from them? How can we learn from these experiences? How can we train ourselves? If we can think like that, only then can we improve ourselves and become wiser. There's a writing of Jamgon Lodro Tai Rinpoche's writings. It's probably It's probably a quotation from Jankyensei Wampa. There's probably that. Now, I'm not going to recite this. I don't know that the words literally, but the basic meaning of this is that in our life, the most significant events, or they go to candidate jobs, are birth and death. First being born and then being died. These are the ones that, these are the most significant events in our lives. They're the two most significant events. And everything else is just insignificant or minor. They're not important. This is what he said. And just as he said, generally, when we experience a loss or when we have a misfortune in life, when we all of a sudden, when you have a sudden rise and then a loss of fortune, the amount of difficulty that we have in that ascension really depends upon the level of our own life. So it depends upon our level or a state of thinking. For example, if you build a wall, a stone wall, heap a few rocks and make a stone wall, and if an ant comes and looks at it, then that wall they're going to see that wall as like a huge mountain, because the ant is tiny, and in comparison, the wall is incredibly high. And if it wants to, if it wants to cross over the wall, then it's the same as us crossing a mountain, climbing a mountain. But if the individual is a different individual than an ant looking at a wall, that's like a dog, and the dog looks at what the dog is going to see is like, it's not that tall. If I can jump a little bit hard, with bits of energy, then I can jump over it. That's how it's going to see it. It's not going to see it as like a mountain that's difficult to get across or get over. Similarly, when we have many ups and downs in our lives, things go up and we go down. It's like there are many highs and lows in our lives. And when they happen, some people, when they encounter the lows, they feel like they lose all hope for this life. And they think, oh, nothing's going to work out. I've lost all hope, they say. And they kind of give up. This happens to many people. But some people see similarly, like the way the dog sees the wall, they see it as being a low wall. So some people, when they see these hardships, don't really see them as being such great difficulties. And they put effort into finding ways to overcome the obstacles. And if you think of an even better person, maybe then another person can look at the difficulties and the problems they have in their life. It's possible that they wouldn't even see the difficulties and obstacles as being bad. They see it as kind of like a stone staircase that allows them to get even better in their life. For example, sometimes the walls, when you get up on the top of the wall and you look around, there's the benefit of when you get up that you can see further in around the area around you. So similarly, some people, when they don't see difficulties as hardships, but instead they see them as methods or methods that allow them to improve themselves, or the circumstances that allow them to improve themselves. And so whether a situation is bad, and no matter how, or whether a situation is a grave situation or not, really depends upon our own skills and abilities, and the breadth of our minds. And so for that reason, when you look at it from this one, the hardships are an opportunity for us to increase the breadth of our thinking and to increase the level of our abilities. To give another example, for example, if you have a good knife, you have to use it, right? You have to keep using it. If you use it, then it'll get sharper and sharper. If you use it, it'll be sharper and better. If you don't use it at all and just leave it aside, then there's the danger that it's going to corrode. And when it's corroded, then it's not going to be any use. Similarly, they're all the great beings of the past. If we look at what they did, it's not like they had some sort of power that we didn't, some sort of a superpower, some sort of ability we didn't have, get some special power. Is that how they made their accomplishments? That's not how it was. All the great beings of the past disregarded all the hardship. No matter how much suffering and hardship they had, they were able to stand up and surpass them and keep moving forward. And so in the end, they were able to gain victory in the battle over all of the obstacles of the Maras, and they were able to achieve realization. And so the biggest difference between us and the great masters of the past is whether we have the courage to face up to difficulties. Whether we have the confidence to do that. That is the biggest difference. Other than that, if you think that the great master of the past had some sort of a superpower that we didn't have some sort of power to, of course there are powers you can get, but that they can gain. But if you look at it from another perspective, that really wasn't the situation. Because we also think about the great master of the past. We think about when we're telling stories about the great master of the past, or stories about great heroes like Ling Gesed, and it's like we think, oh, maybe I could be like that. We think that they're really powerful, they're really courageous, they're really persistent. It's like Gesed, no matter how many battles fought, he always won. And so when we see that, we think, oh, if only I could be like that. We think that, right? But for them to have such great courage and for them to win, how did this happen? It's the way they thought when they were confronted with difficulties and enemies. What they did, how they thought it. That's what it comes down to. If there were no difficulties, then there's no courage, then there's no participants. If there's no enemy, you can't triumph in battle. And so when you think about the great beings and the great heroes, and we consider them as being incredible. And this is because they were able to triumph over any hardships or any enemies or maras that they faced. And it's also because they never got discouraged in what they're doing. They never hung their heads down, and they never tried to appease anything. And like they had in their vocabularies, in their minds, there were no words like procrastination or depression. They always thought about facing up things and moving forward. And so for that reason, avoidance and appeasement were even less there. So no matter what hardship or danger occurred, they were able to make it into a factor that allowed them to achieve results and to improve themselves. And so this is what makes the difference between ordinary people and great people. And so this is something that we need to understand. And it's very important to understand this. For if we think about the past incarnations of the Karmapa, some people probably think that, the Karmapa couldn't possibly encounter any misfortune or any suffering. It's quite possible to think that, but if you look at the actual situation, in fact, the situation was not the way we think it is. So other than a pure realm like Sukhavati, or someplace pure realm like that, there's no place in the world where there's no suffering or hardship. It's impossible for there to be anywhere where there's no suffering and hardship. In particular, in this world, in such a time when the 5 degenerations are running rampant, And if someone thinks they want to spread the Dharma, then they're going to have innumerable obstacles and innumerable attackers. There's some words about this. So it's like it says a quotation from the Buddha who said that the obstacles are much more plentiful than the Dharma that is so rare. So because Dharma is extremely rare, in comparison, that there are many attackers and people who cause harm, and so it's like when you were in so the attackers and the obstacles come kind of like rain, and so therefore, when you're facing trying to spread the Dharma in the world, you have to face up to the many hundreds of dangers and sufferings experienced. For example, if you're getting ready to go, you've gone to a battlefield, then you're kind of like surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers, and there's like no escape, and you're in that sort of situation. And if you need to escape from that, and if you need to get out of that situation, you need to shed blood and make yourself a path to get out. And so that is, and otherwise you have to do, that is the situation. And it's like you're surrounded, like you're overwhelmed and surrounded by all the Maras and the obstacles. That's the situation. So for this reason, when we talk about the bodhisattvas, we call them heroes. That's the word sattva. We say bodhisattva. So the word sattva can be understood to mean a hero or a warrior. That's why. If there were no hardships or obstacles, then there'd be absolutely no need to have courage. There'd be no reason for bodhisattvas to have heroic minds. Likewise, for each of the incarnations of the Karmapa, the hardships that they experienced were all different. The degree was different, the form they took, and the kind of way they appeared. And if in the future I have an opportunity, I'd like to speak about. But in any case, when we read the liberation stories of the previous Karmapas, during their entire lifetimes, it's like they only endured hardship. They only had loss. They had ups and downs, and so for us, what they only feel that what they've left for us is like a treasury filled with light and jewels. And so they've given the best things to us, and they've taken all the worst for themselves, and they've gone on. And so that's the feeling that we get. And so it's kind of like we have like a saying in the world. So the greater your skills, the greater your responsibility is. The greater the responsibility, then the greater the pressure. This is a saying we say, right? That's similar to that. The various incarnations of the Karmapa, and we think about how great of a responsibility, then how much pressure they were under. Only they can really know that. It's difficult for us to say. And the reason for that is we weren't in the same status, and we were not taking the responsibility. And so because we don't carry that same responsibility, we don't know what difficulties they had and what pressure they were under. But what we can know is that they had such a great responsibility. They were under such great pressure, and yet they were never afraid. They were never discouraged, and they never tried to avoid hardship. They took all of the hardship and difficulties and tried to change it into opportunities to improve themselves and grow. And with great courage, they faced up to all the hardship and difficulties. Not only did they face up to them, they transformed all of those hardships and difficulties into the circumstances for gathering the accumulations and bringing benefit for others. This is what we need to learn from them. This is what we need to take as their example. So to sum it up, the main point is that normally when we're experiencing when things are going bad for us, when we are in a bad situation, what we need to say is, when normally we say is, well, why am I so unlucky? Why do things never work for me? No matter how hard I try, nothing works out. Nothing ever goes well for me. And so always like whinging and moaning about that. We do this, right? But there's no point to that. There's no point to complaining and moaning the whole time. In our lifetimes, most of our lives is all things not working out and encountering difficulties, because it's the nature of life is suffering, right? And so for that reason, we think that in our thought that everything is going to turn out as we want spontaneously and without effort is not the way things actually are. So therefore, in the future, when you have some sort of a bad situation, we encounter some sort of a difficulty, what we should immediately be able to think is, oh, I've had this difficulty. The difficulty did happen. If there had been some way to prevent it from happening beforehand, I could have done it, but it happened. The difficulty has happened. So I think I've just got a really great opportunity to practice and to accumulate merit. So it's important for us to have that feeling. In the very least, even if if you face every day of things like things that are unauspicious, that are bad and not working, if we can use them as conditions for improving ourselves and advancing it. And if we can see them as the way, then we can do that. So the ability, the degree to which you're able to face up to hardship and difficulties, and the ability to keep moving forward and not give up, no matter how much loss we overcome in life. This is the amount by which we're going to grow stronger, where we're going to become the amount we're going to be more courageous and more strong. If the difficulties we encounter, it can be transformed into circumstances for us to practice the Dharma, then there are never going to be any difficulties for us to practicing Dharma. We'll be able to practice the Dharma, and we'll never get discouraged, and we'll never get lazy at all. And sometimes we get lazy, get totally discouraged, and give up, and that won't happen at all. And so we need to see, I think, how is it that we can take these difficulties and hardships and make them into aids for the practice of the Dharma? How can we transform them into ways that we can improve ourselves? And so thinking about this is a very important point. So now I'm going to continue on. The next is taking hostility as the path, the 19th good deed, or the 9th taking hostility path. And the verse reads, although I couldn't bear it, I did not scorn suffering sentient beings for being vile. The faults and obscurations are their nature. Knowing this made it even less tolerable. I think of this as one of my good deeds. Now there's the fine explanations of Sangha by the Chamgyal Sangpa. What it says there is, exalted beings are brought more harm by their retinues than their enemies. Aside from the parasites in its body, what other beast could eat a lion? So the main point here is, I need to introduce the main point of this. When you talk about a great being, like a great person or a great lama, more of the harm comes not from the enemies, but from their retinues, their students, and their attendants. The people who harm them most are the students and the people who serve them. For example, aside from the parasites in a lion's body, no other living being won't dare to harm a lion, but all of the parasites that live in its body, they can harm the lion, right? This is what it is like. It's also said similarly in the sutras that the Buddha taught. So that the Buddha Dharma cannot be harmed by any other people, outside people, or any other religions. But who can harm the Buddha's teachings? It's the people who say that they uphold the Buddha's teachings and that they are Buddhist. These are the people who can harm the Buddha's teachings. So for that reason, when you think, how is it that the teachings of the Buddha will be destroyed? How that they will be destroyed? When the Buddha prophesied, that what he said was, that's what the Buddha said, and we need to keep it in mind. What the Buddha said is, in the future, will be my teachings will be destroyed in the future when the people who uphold the teachings, the people who say they're Buddhists, the monks and the nuns, get into arguments and dispute and say I'm in accord with the Dharma and they're not, and the other says I'm in accord with them, they're not, and they're only always disputing with each other, and because of their opposition, they're going to break into schisms, and that will destroy the teachings. And so the main point is that the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni are weakened by internal disease. The teachings of the Buddha Kashyapa were destroyed by the laziness of the bhikshus at the time. They got lazy, didn't practice well, and that's why the teachings of Kashyapa disappeared, as the Buddha said. And so if we think about the teachings of the Buddha, the greatest harm to the teachings comes not from other religions or people who are outside. They can't harm the teachings. Instead, the greatest harm and danger comes from the people who say that they're Buddha, people who say that they uphold the teachings of the Buddha. These are the ones where there is the greatest danger of them harming the Buddha's teachings. So if you think about with someone like the Karmapa MIKYÖ DORJE, he treated many people with great unbounded kindness and love. And there are many people who treated them extremely kindly, but they didn't appreciate his karma, his kindness. And they started to have malicious thoughts and did things and began to harm him. And when the people to harm him, not only not respond to harm by causing harm, he continued to still treat them with great love. And there's no count to the number of people, such people. And among them, some people, and first he'd give the people who wanted Dharma changing the Dharma, the people who needed material things, he gave them that. He was very kind to them, both in terms of Dharma and the materially. In the end, they'd say kind of pretend, he wasn't kind to us at all. They pretend. They wouldn't. So these are people who would. There are many people who wouldn't say any good things about him, and they would say good things. Now, for ordinary people, that'd be kind of no. They didn't. Ordinary people, there's no problem. It's understandable because they understand that. But there are some people who are like, say, they're geshes, or they say there's God, but they ended up being actually really terrible people. What they do is at first they come to MIKYÖ DORJE, and he'd give them material gifts without any reserve. And in terms of Dharma, he taught them all the Dharma, and he fulfilled every wish that they had. But later, if they taught them something that didn't quite match their wishes or didn't quite fulfill their wishes, then they'd start criticizing and scolding. And what they'd say is, and I'm someone who has some few qualities, I have some education, but still the Karmapa doesn't think of me as being an important person or being a significant person. So I'm going back to my homeland. I'm going to go back to go back to a monster and do like a scholar's work and continue some and perform some activity. And then one day, see if I can become well known as a scholar. And they say, I'm going to make myself going to. And so one day we'll see what's true. So there are many people who did this and just left. And so that's that kind of it. That's just one example. And there are several others. So many other examples where people, MIKYÖ DORJE treated them well, and they treated him badly in return. And the way MIKYÖ DORJE thought about them is that ordinarily, if treat someone well and they treat you badly, we get angry, right? We get upset. But MIKYÖ DORJE, not only did he not get angry, there's not even the slightest wavering or change in the way he thought of them as before. And when he saw these people again, he was still very relaxed when he saw them. He'd speak with them in a very carefree way. And even the way he looked at them, he'd only look at them in a nice way. It's not like kind of looking at them with a kind of angry expression. Even if he had things, whatever, he would still, if they wanted, and he'd still fulfill all the wishes that they had in terms of things and material. And because of this, because there are some people who had a little bit of merit, and when they saw this MIKYÖ DORJE's example and example of liberation, do this, and this is able to change their minds just a little bit. So this is able to tame their mind streams a little bit, make them more responsive to the Dharma. There's some people who just had no fortune. No matter what MIKYÖ DORJE do, it just wouldn't help them at all. And so for them, MIKYÖ DORJE saw that nothing that he did was much benefit. Still, even for those who had no fortune, no merit, he just never gave up on protecting them with compassion. He never gave up on them. He always prayed for them and was concerned for them. And so that is enough for right now. We will take a 30-minute break, and then we will reconvene.
Nam dai nyam be sim chen tham che namai kin chai chi ge kula sawan dip so mahai nam kha dai nyam be sim chen tham che namai di chen lo chen zo be kula sawan dip so mahai nam kha dai nyam be sim chen tham che namai du je ju be kula sawan dip so mahai nam kha dai nyam be sim chen Chole namba gebe gese yeso Padai Mi Bajra Pinzoi Tsoba Matsawa Mi Bai Rabjan Jasu Dige Jane Debai Nyambrai Kede Lama Yidam Sanje Jancho Semba Boe Kandroi Chijon Sumi Sodai Chibai Namla Yurai Ge Oi Tujin Drui Dindoi Shisoi Sui Shine Jingi Landoi Sui Sashi Pichu Jushin Mitoi Jai Rai Nishin Nide Jembai De Sange Shindoi Mide Pilai Trudye Namlai Shilai Jemrai Shoi Chujoi Soi Shubai Sange Janchoi Simbai Dai Lamai Doje Lobe Dai Yedan Hasoi Kordai Je Desoi Deshe Malila Nishe Rai Jebai Dai Nishe Jewai Chajai Dai Jewai Bundai Dunjoi De Mende Chidoi Nene Mele Gumai Namlai Bui Tuje Tsegoin Sheso Se Shene Jingye Landu Soi Oi Me Tela Poi Zai Me Gai Samon Ju Saparanai Samai Ai Oi Nije Mende Sambon De Bebe Chancho Lamlai Parche Mi Joy She De Soi De She Kumbai Tobai Da Sepai Mi Tre She Warai Mi Ne She Nam Kai Nyam Bin Chowa Tre Warai Shu Jele ge ga to yin de de de
Now, can you hear me? Can you all hear me, right? I've already spoken quite about this, but KARMAPA MIKYÖ DORJE was someone who always responds to harm, brought benefit. He saw enemies as friends and never had any bias toward any other school. The things that he had, he never had any stinginess. He never kept them. He always gave them away to everyone else without any reserve. And he never had any attachment to the friends who helped him, nor did he have any aversion towards the enemies who harmed him. And so for these reasons, what some people would say is that MIKYÖ DORJE is really mercurial. So saying mercurial, this means that, how do we say this? Like some people is like, some people who never really had any stability on there and everything, so he's easily swayed. And so that whatever people asked for, then he'd believe anything they'd say. So he's kind of gullible. And they said that he was, so he was like, it's kind of, he had kind of a small mind. See, that's, so they thought that he had kind of a limited way of thinking, or so that they thought he didn't have a very broad way of thinking. And they said that no matter what he did, he was always too extreme in it. I mean, he didn't know how to practice it appropriately for the time and occasion, they thought. And so people said to MIKYÖ DORJE, yeah, he's a lama, but in terms of worldly terms, he was really kind of shunned in society. And so they said, oh, like the people who are solid and useful, people who had skills, and say the people said, I'm like this and that person's like this. So many people said this, but all these people who disparaged MIKYÖ DORJE in this way, MIKYÖ DORJE never really blamed them or never looked at them badly. Instead, what he said is that that's the one way of saying, one way of looking at me. Perhaps that's one way of seeing me. So if you look at me from one angle, it's probably like that, he said. That's what he would say. So when And so the reason why he was never really ruffled when other people acted badly, or why he never got upset when people taught him like that, is probably that he saw that there aren't such a great hopes for ordinary individuals. And so because of this, he was like never really worried about it, and he was never really offended by it. And so how do we know this? It's because if we look at, there's his attendant, Sanjay Pedro, so he attended to MIKYÖ DORJE, and he saw this himself. Sometimes students wouldn't come to see MIKYÖ DORJE, and when they'd come to see him, when they were speaking, when MIKYÖ DORJE was speaking with them, then some people would were not able or did not dare to tell things exactly as they are. Many people were unafraid to say things as they are to MIKYÖ DORJE, and so they were afraid that it was going to. And they thought that it might, it might offend him or might cause him to worry. MIKYÖ DORJE always said to those people, I said, "It's not true to worry about me getting embarrassed. No worry about that. I just don't get embarrassed. I don't get upset. I feel problems about it because this is their ordinary individuals, and this is, they can't transcend that nature of being ordinary individuals. So there's nothing else that I think about it." So basically, as I said, it says in the way the Bodhisattva, just as unruly beings as vast as the sky. So there are many people who are very wild, and so he understood that sentient beings are untamed and uncouth, and so from the basic of the mind, he realized that this is why sentient beings were such uncouth and such bad people. And for that reason, he said he never could see people as being badly. It's like in the Maitreya aspiration that Maitreya wrote. As it says, the Buddhas never vilifies beings whose minds are stained. So Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, when they see who are obscured by their karma and obscurations, and who are controlled by their karma and obscurations, even when they do terrible things, they never get embarrassed, and they never think that's wrong, that's bad. They never thought that. Similarly, MIKYÖ DORJE also thought in the same way. In any case, until such a time as they have abandoned karma afflictions, that's basically, there's no way they can have any other nature than that, he said. And so he would speak about this, and Sanjay Pedro himself actually heard him say this. And so when we look at this, so when people came and harmed MIKYÖ DORJE, when they repaid his kindness inappropriately, then he would do whatever he could to help them as much as he could. He would never feel hostility to the people who had heard him forget about doing that. He was never even particularly upset about them. So next, if we kind of summarize the main points of this 19th session, the main points of this is that basically the main point is that when there are people who harm you or people who have grudges and resentment for you, how should we see them? And when these situations occur, what methods should we use? What do we do? And so in terms of the way to think about it, there are a couple of different ways of thinking about it. The first is that is thinking about it in terms of the 8 worldly concerns. When you think about it in terms of the 8 worldly concerns, first, basically, think about the 8 worldly concerns. So there's basically this one, thinking about it in terms of the 8 worldly concerns. And what this means is that first is when there are people who harm or threaten you. When you think about them, there might be people we've never really had any connection to before. Or there might be people that we have treated kindly, and they might harm us pointlessly, or they might intentionally harm us. So at that point, what do we do? So if someone is intentionally causing us harm, the way we need to think is that we can think about, because we can probably guess what type of karmic ripening will occur to them as a result of that, because you have treated them kindly, and when they're returning that wrongly with harm, because of their ingratitude, we can kind of we can probably guess what type of a karmic ripening they'll experience in the future. And so if you really believe in karmic cause and effect, what you'd think is, I think that virtuous causes bring pleasant results and unvirtuous causes bring unpleasant. This is what they'd believe, right? So if you have that belief, then when you think, well, this person has done something, they've repaid my kindness wrongly, and so in the future, what kind of a bad result are they going to experience? You can think, they're definitely going to experience a bad result of this. We can understand this, we can have a deep understanding of that. So if we have that understanding, so if someone who's talking about it in terms of the perspective who believes in karmic cause and effect, so instead of feeling angry or egregious for that person who's harmed them, they're going to feel compassion. And the reason for this is that the person who believes in karmic cause and effect will think that this person just doesn't understand that in the future they're going to experience some sort of an unbearable and terrible result. And it's because they are controlled by their strong afflictions and they just don't understand anything. And so for that reason, so they have no control. They're under the control of something else, and they fall into that state. If we think about it, well, instead of getting angry, there are actually more reasons to feel compassion. If we think about it from another angle, when someone else causes us harm, most people are going to get angry at them. Oh, we're going to have some sort of a mental suffering, mental pain. We're going to think why this happens is because what we think in our mind is, and they insulted me, we think. And they put all the blame on me, we'll think. And they think I've been mentally injured. They've harmed me mentally. And so because of these feelings, we get angry at the other person, and then we get upset. So one of these injuries, mental injuries we might suffer, how is it that we're harmed? How is it that we are injured? So generally, there are many different ways that we can be harmed, but if you kind of summarize them all, there are basically 4 different types. And the first is you might lose a thing that you treasure or a person you treasure, and something that you consider that you're losing something that important that you had. Now, the second is when someone else is listing all your faults and criticizing you. The third is when you have physical or mental pain or discomfort, when they cause that to you. And the fourth is when the other person is scorning you and insulting you. So in this way, there are these 4 different types of injury that we experience. in terms of the primary, these are the primary types of experience we have. When we look at these 4 types of injuries, these, if we look at the 8 worldly concerns, they fit exactly, because I mean the 8 worldly concerns, there are 8 dharmas, and so there are the 4 positive dharmas and the 4 negative dharmas, right? We talk about the 4 negative aspects of the 8 worldly concerns, and the 4 types of concern I've just spoken about are basically the same. And so for that reason, all of the injuries that can happen to us can be included in these 4 types of concerns. So if we really consider in detail what these 4 concerns are, it's not getting what we want, other people blaming us, suffering, physical suffering, physical and mental suffering, and so forth. All of these concerns, all of these dharmas, come down to our own attachment ultimately. When people are blaming us and criticizing us, it's like weird. It's like we don't want to be criticized, but other people are saying things that are unpleasant things, and people are doing things that we don't want, then we naturally get angry to it. This happens, right? And so if we think about it in detail, ultimately they come down to our own attachment. And so, and if we don't consider other people's praise or their blame as being particularly important, then in our minds, since we're not attached to their praise or their blame, we don't get delighted when they praise us, and when other people criticize us, we don't get all that upset about it. And so when we have a lot of happiness, when we get really happy or upset about something, it's because we have attachment. It's because we think it's important, and because of that, it affects our mind. Now, among the four dharmas, the first of them, not getting things or losing things. So talk about things of losing things or getting things you don't want, or when you're separated from someone you love. So these basically 2 different parts. And so when you think about the losing or not getting the things you want, or losing the ones that you already possess, so what do you do in those times? So when we think about this, when someone takes away an important thing, or suddenly we lose it, someone takes it away from us, then we have mental suffering, right? Actually, if we take that loss of our precious possessions, if you lose your money, you lose your wallet, and you lose all the money that's not along with the wallet. At that time, when you had this financial loss, you should consider that loss of that financial loss as being the practice of generosity. I've lost it, they took it, and so now I'm giving it to them. If you can think in that way, it's good. And the reason for this is giving. Generosity means when you're going to give someone something you wouldn't ordinarily be able to give. Something that is precious to you, you're kind of reluctant to give. If you give that way, then that's generosity. If there's something you have no use for that you don't really like, if you give that to someone else, this is sort of just, getting rid of your own, getting rid of old stuff. You can't really say it's generosity. You don't need it, right? Since you don't need it, so give it to a couple of people. And so then, it doesn't take up space in your house, and it's good. So it's kind of like you're just cleaning out old stuff. But actually, generosity, what that is when you actually give it to someone else, like this is really nice, the poor guy. But if I don't have this, I'm going to miss it. But then you give it up and give it to someone else, then that's what we call generosity. If there's something you don't like, you don't need, anyone can give it to anyone. So that alone does not make it into generosity. Just merely putting something in someone else's hands is not generosity. Generosity is primarily the wish to give, as it says in the way of the Bodhisattva. It's the wish to give, being able to give something over to someone else, whether body, speech, or mind, and your possessions and your merits, to be able to sacrifice it all for someone else. That's what we need to think about it. That's what we mean in terms of generosity. And so what are we actually giving to? We actually think of, or excuse me, what is it that generosity counteracts? It's stinginess. And so like you've had some money and you're not able to give any to anyone. And so you aren't able, and things aren't working out because of that's what we call stinginess. So generosity is the antidote for generosity, because when you are generous, that has to decrease your stinginess. If it doesn't make your stinginess decrease, then it's not actually generosity. And so we should be able to give others whatever things we treasure and cherish. So if we can give that, then that actually becomes an antidote for stinginess. And so for that reason, when we're upset because we've lost the things that we treasure, then what should we think in our minds? And said, okay, I've given it to them. This is generosity. I've been generous to them. I've given it to them. We should be able to think that way. In addition to that, if we are able, we should have like a new thing. We shouldn't think about that person who actually took them. We shouldn't say, oh, we should have to think about them kind of in a bit of clemency. We should be able to have a benevolent attitude. You think, oh, it's probably going to benefit them. Maybe it benefit them. And because they've taken these things, may they have no bad result. May they never experience any bad situations. You should make that sort of aspiration. So in brief, so because of your initial thought that when you lose your wallet or something else, you've lost something, you need to change it and to transform it into thought that, oh, I've given a gift, I've been generous to them. You transform that sort of a thought, and then it becomes a cause, or it becomes a circumstance for gathering the accumulation of bread. And if you do that, it's really extremely beneficial. We have a saying that, like the stone that kills two birds, because of one method you accomplish two different purposes, right? It's not kind of like that. So we accomplish two great purposes. That's what it is. And so these are the things that you treasure, your precious possessions. If someone else steals them or takes them away from you, that's the way we should think about that. Now then, if there are people who you love, people who are close to you, if they leave you, or if they turn their backs on you or betray you, then how do you think? If we think about this carefully, if you're someone who really believed you, then no matter what situation, then you're still going to believe them no matter what situation happens. And so if someone who really believes you, no matter how much someone does to create problems and try to split you from someone else or make disputes, so it's not going to happen that they're going to leave you if they have real belief in someone. It's like if you're like a loving mother. So actually the loving mother is actually in their life. When you come to the hard point, it's that the one who's always behind her, there are only just a few people who are actually behind you in your life. So in your stand, maybe just more than one or two, but usually there are people say they're friends, that they like you and all this. And they can fill a whole valley with these people. But actually, when you're in a really bad situation, then only just a couple of people are going to stand behind you. And so the times when you're in really difficult situations, you can really see, you can understand who really believes you and really counts on you. And so in this way, we can look at when the great beings from historical times were slandered by people or wrongly accused or set up a secret plot so that many people start to suspect them. Like, for example, the Buddha Bhagavan, there was the Devadatta who made an unfounded accusations and tried to kill the Buddha even. And there are many different circumstances that happened with him. There were also at that time, during the time of the Buddha, there are also many non-Buddhists, the extremists, who got jealous of the Buddha and who criticized the Buddha and slandered the Buddha. And because of this, they started creating suspicions about the Buddha in society and gave many people reasons to doubt the Buddha. But great beings, because of people betraying them, people don't get upset at people because they betrayed them. They don't get angry or unhappy about this. Not only that, they wouldn't feel a resentment in return for that, nor would they wouldn't want to return the harm for harm. In place of that, they would meditate on sympathy and compassion for the other person. They would really feel very distraught for the person who had caused them, who had stricken by karma and fictions and did this. They would be very concerned about them because that there was nothing they could do. So this is the way it happened. Like if we give an example, if you have a loving mother and her child, grows up and gets to a certain age, it gets to like a teenager, right? 12, 13, 12, 14, around in there. The child stops listening to the parents and sometimes they won't come home. They never listen to what the children say. They do all sorts of things, right? This happens, right? But if there's from the perspective of a mother who really loves her child, no matter how badly this child acts, she's never going to act badly. No matter what terrible things that she doesn't feel further away from the child. In fact, she still feels thinks more about them and feels more responsibility for them. And so for this reason, there's no reason to feel upset or to worry about the people who have abandoned us or betrayed us. And the reason is that that other person is going to gradually change over time. And if you really think well and treat the other person well, then one day that person will possibly understand. And it's possible that they'll be able to really think about it. Actually, when we're thinking in terms of being a Dharma practitioner, if we have the idea that when we treat others well, that they'll treat us well in return, and then we expect that in return, if that's the way we think, it's actually not accurate at all. And the reason for this is that there are several reasons, but the first reason is that when you treat others well, it's not necessarily so that they're going to treat you well in return. Because if you have the expectation to do something good for them, they're going to help you back, then one day it's not going to happen to you well. And then it's going to cause you a lot of pain. Because it's just, doesn't match the actual facts of how things are. The second thing is that when bodhisattvas need to work for the sake of infinite sentient beings, they need to bring benefit to infinite sentient beings. Some of them have good characters. They're kind people. You need to work for their benefit. And there are people with bad characters who have extremely strong afflictions. You need to work for their sake too. And when you're benefiting them, then, if you have a great hope that I'm going to do something good for them and put a great hope on them, have expectations on them, then they're gonna retire them for bad because their character is bad. They have such strong afflictions. They're only going to treat you badly in return. They're not going to do well. And so if they don't treat you well in return, then there's a danger that you're going to get discouraged. Like there's the story of Shariputra losing his bodhicitta. I think you've probably heard this. I don't remember it so clearly, but to talk about it basically in general. This Shariputra, one of the great Shravaka disciples of the Buddha, he is the most well-known ones were Madhgalyana and Shariputra. I spoke about Madhgalyana the other day. To speak about Shariputra, actually, just to speak about it in terms of Mahayana, this is not the foundation vehicle idea, but what the Mahayana vehicle says is that Shariputra, what it says in the Sutra, Mahayana Sutra, is that in the past, at one time, in one lifetime, he did rouse bodhicitta to achieve great Buddhahood. He made the resolve to bring all sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood. And then he began to practice the practices of a bodhisattva. But he had an obstacle that came up, and the obstacle was that one day there was a Mara who came, and this Mara, I thought, I need to make a problem, an obstacle for that. I'm going to change it back into a Brahma. And so he appeared as a Brahma, and he said, please give me your hand. Be generous and give me your hand, he said. And when he said, please give me your hand, and Shariputra thought to himself, without any doubt, he cut off his right hand, and then he picked it up with his left. So he cut off his right hand. So he only had his left hand. So he used his left hand to give the right hand to the other person. And when he gave that, then the Mara said, "You gave it to me with your left hand. You know, this is disrespectful because they consider the left hand bad in India, right? So this is what we say. It's because you use it when you go to the bath to clean yourself when you go to the bathroom, right? And so when he gave it with his left hand, he said, "This is disrespectful," said the Mara. And we said this because then the Shariputra at this point said, "If it's this difficult to benefit a single sentient being, then there's no way I can benefit all sentient beings." And so then he started to give up sentient beings, and he lost his bodhicitta. And so this is what it says, right? Now, I'm not certain if this story is exactly how it is, but that's the general idea. And so this way, if we have too much expectation, when a bodhisattva is working for the sake of individual, the biggest obstacle is expecting something in return. When you're doing something for sentient beings, you can't expect anything in return, because if you expect that, that's going to make problems for them, because there are many sentient beings. They're good ones and they're bad ones, and most of them are actually bad. And when you're benefiting them, it's extremely difficult. It's very difficult to do. It's difficult for them to It's difficult to actually bring benefit to them. And so if you have some expectation, if you have this big expectation that we're going to do something well for them, then that's not what it is. Then it's basically an obstacle for achieving great enlightenment. There's no benefit to them. So many people have the expectation that you do something good for someone else and they're going to treat you well. But if you do that, that's just not right. Or it's not, that's just not how it is. So if you talk about it from the perspective of a Dharma practitioner, and in particular for someone who's practicing bodhicitta, we need to accept all sentient beings with loving kindness, compassion. And we have to treat them all equally with loving kindness and compassion. It's not unnecessary to mention that we treat those who treat us well, that we should treat them well, but even those people who oppose us and who harm us and betray us, we have to treat them well and think of them with loving kindness and compassion. Likewise, we should need to do whatever we can to understand their pleasures and pains. But we need to think about it when someone is going to cause harm. So what is the point, the why that they're doing this? What suffering are they experiencing? So maybe I don't understand well now, but they have the desire to want to know. And you need to think about this as much as you can. Instead of thinking about happened before and earlier, instead of I gave something before, did something in the past, so you need to do something good. And what is the reason? So notice that calculating thought. You should have this this idea of treasuring them and loving them and treating and take them like the responsibility for them. Just as a loving mother will takes care of her children with love, it's the same way. It's very important for us to treat them all in the same way. And so if we're able to do, then that's a sign that we have loving kindness and compassion. If we don't, it seems like on the outside, like we seem really loving people, we seem we're very loving and very compassionate beings. But if it is something just happens, doesn't quite match our wishes, something that we just don't quite like, and someone becomes like a hostile enemy. If that's how it is, this is just showing a sign that you don't have living kindness, love, kindness, and compassion. So you're always saying that yourself, but you're not. But the point is that you actually do it. When something doesn't happen as you like it, then you get upset and you think of them as an enemy. So they don't do what you want, and you think of them an enemy. If you look at that, I would say people say, "Oh, I have loving kindness and compassion," but this is that. But that is loving kindness that is attached to your own selfish interests, your own needs, your own selfishness. It's not the loving kindness of only thinking about that other sentient being's needs. And then following this, what to do when others insult us and criticize us. So when other people insult us and criticize us, what should we do? So here there's what it says about this in the 8 verses for the training of the mind by Geshe Langri Tampa, the great Karmapa master. What it says is, when others out of jealousy scold, insult, and treat me in other unreasonable ways, may I take such defeat upon myself and offer the victory to myself. The point is that when someone else is out of jealousy, then criticizes me, scolds me, or insults me, or do other inappropriate, wrong things to me, if they do something like that, then you take the defeat and the loss to someone else and you give the victory and the benefit to others. And my head's not feeling quite right. So when other people are verbally here, they're talking about verbally, when they're insulting us or criticizing us, when they're harming us verbally in this way, what we need to think is, the person who's insulting us is basically the fires of hatred are burning in their mind. And it's like the wind of jealousy is blowing, and because that they have less merit, or because they have such strong afflictions, and because of that they say various things verbally. But if they understood it, if we can think about it carefully, because they do, it's because the way they think are just because it's like some sort of, it's because we are unable to think about ourselves. We aren't able to have exempt lives. The one aspect is that they don't have any control of themselves, because the afflictions are stronger than they are, and so they lose to their opponent and then are controlled by it. For example, if someone is going to beats us with a stick, then that stick has no blame for the stick, because someone else has taken it and using it, and that stick has no control, that someone else is using it. So we don't particularly get angry at the stick, right? Because the stick itself, it does not just the stick does not just beat us itself. Only if someone else uses it to beat us, it doesn't actually beat us on its own. If we think about it in this way, then the other person's the same. The other person is controlled by their afflictions, and the afflictions are stronger than theirs, and so they've got nothing they can do. But if you think about it really carefully, when other people like disparage us or they criticize us or insult us, many of these situations, I think about it from one angle, regardless of the side, we get us some sort of a fault of our own or some sort of a situation of our own. That's why it happens. So when you have that sort of little bit of a fault there, you have a little bit of a fault, and the other person then kind of magnifies it, and it kind of turns up the volume on it, so it makes it really big. But if you talk about it in the final analysis, ultimately it's some sort of our own inadequacy or fault or weakness or attachment of our own, and because of that, then there's something for the other person to denigrate and to blame and to oppose. That's why, right? And so for that reason, when someone else is criticizing us or insulting us, then we need to use that opportunity, turn our attention inwards, and examine ourselves really well. This is extremely important. And the reason why it's so important is that ordinarily, most people just really can't see well what their own faults are. As I said in a quotation I gave the other day, in order, though you have a eye to see other people, you can use your eyes. If you want to see yourself, you need a mirror. So you have your two eyes. We have eyes that can see other people, but to see our own face, we don't have eyes that can see that. We don't see our own face with our own eyes. And what we need is a mirror. If you get a mirror, and then if you look at that, otherwise you can't see your face. So they are our own faults. We just generally, most people just don't really see our own faults. Instead, we only see other people's faults. When you look out at others, we're always looking outward too much. We're always looking outward. And because of that, it seems like all the mistakes are made by other people, and we don't see our own mistakes. And so what the great beings think is that they're the opposite of that. They say, all the faults are my own and all the qualities are someone else. That's how they think. As I said the other day, Geshe Langtamba said this too, right? There's the saying by Geshe Langtamba. The main point of what he said is that no matter how many texts I read, I only see one point, and what that point is, all the faults are mine, all the qualities are sentient beings. No matter what book, I don't see any other really critical point than that. Also, the old Kaji forefathers said is that whether we know how to take up good deeds and give up bad deeds in karmic cause and effect comes from seeing more of your own qualities and seeing others' qualities. Only when we can see that will we be able to really properly do what we should do and not do what we shouldn't do in terms of karma. Because if we do not see our own faults and others' qualities, then we won't be able to. If you always think, oh, I don't have any faults, all faults are everyone else's, if you aren't able to really check yourself, you're unable to correct yourself. You don't see any faults. You think that everyone else has made all the mistakes. And so for that reason, because we've mistaken what we need to do or to give up, so we aren't able to do them. So this is an important point for us to understand. And so when other people are criticizing us, what we should think is that, and so normally I don't see my own faults really clearly, but because of them, their kindness, because of their kindness and their help, I'm able to see my faults. I can find a way to improve my faults. And so there's an incredible opportunity for me to improve myself and to become a better person. And so thinking like this is really important. If someone would blame us, like when we're like accusing us wrong, when we're completely innocent, when you're totally innocent, and they make it sort of, and they're accusing us on giving unfounded accusations, the way we should think is that So that right now, at this point in our lives, what we can see with our lives, we would think that we've done nothing. But in the past lifetime, we've definitely done some sort of a wrong. And because of that, doing that wrong in the past, the karmic result of that is that people are giving us wrong, unfounded accusations. And when we look at it at first, it seems like there's no reason. There's no reason for people to say other people. That's what we think. But actually, if you look at it, because of karmic cause and effect, it's that nothing can happen without the causes or conditions. And so, for that reason, because we have the karmic debts with other people, because we have not purified ourselves of those. So we think that all the unfounded accusations are because of the karma from our past lives. So in brief, when other people insult us or criticize us, what we should do is, so we should see if we actually have the problems that other people say we have, then if we do them, we'd fix them. And if we don't, we should use this as a way, as an encouragement to us to not let such faults happen. If you have like a strong feeling and you get upset and you really don't feel comfortable, then there's no point in that. You should not be proud. Instead, we should be modest. We should think of this as like studying, as an opportunity to really check and correct ourselves. And we should be peaceful and measured and relaxed. And examine ourselves well. If we're able to really correct ourselves, then that's good. If we can do this, then we can become better than we were before. We can become a new person. And other people's insults and other people's criticisms can be transformed in our practice. And we have the hope that this can happen. So at this point, I'd like to tell a story. Probably I'll tell the story and then we'll call it a day. So actually today, I wasn't able to describe everything. Among the 4 dharmas, I've described 2 of these, so there are 2 more to discuss. So I will just talk about those tomorrow. So I have to think about bending out of other people in return for harm that they've done. So there's a story about it. It's a story. It's like a history or a true story. Perhaps you all know this actually, but I better thought I should explain it. In Tibet, actually, the level what we take as an example as like a Mila practitioner is Milarepa. This is everyone in all Dharma legends accept this. They think he's like an example of a Dharma practitioner. If you're going to be a Dharma practitioner, you have to be like Milarepa. That's what we always say. So, no, but even for a practitioner like Milarepa, there are people who tried to harm him. And particularly when Milarepa passed away, it's because someone else gave him poison that he died. As I think you all know. But who is it who gave them? There are different explanations of this. Usually the way we generally say it is that as taught in the liberation story of Milarepa by Tsangye Nihon, there was a Geshe Tsakpua. He was probably some sort of a Kadampa Geshe. He gave him, and so he poisoned Milarepa, and that Milarepa thus died. But the oldest liberation stories, the ones by the Milarepa's 8 close disciples, and then we could say, and then the liberation story by KARMAPA DORJE, who was 4 or 5 generations after him. It's from the same region. In his Black Treasury, Life's Liberation Story of Milarepa, the one who gave Milarepa the poison was not Geshe Tsakpua. What it says is that there's an area of Nyangam. So this is on the path, on the way towards Dram in Nepal. So these are regions of Nyangam and Jing, and this is the area where he passed away. So Milarepa passed away in the region of Nyangam and Jing. And so there was a Bumpo in that region, and that Bumpo's name was Tingtun Jangbar. And so he was a Bumpo or a shaman, and so he made his living through services for people, for sick people, or when people had different problems, they lost things, or if they had got sick and so forth. So he would, should we say, serve beings in that way, shall we say? But Milarepa himself, when Milarepa was staying in Jing and Yangam, because you can say the blessings of Milarepa, that's what it was, probably was, or in that region, there weren't any famines or epidemics in that region. They began very few of these, and for that reason, like he had lost his income, because if there's no one getting sick, then no one's going to invite him to come. And so no one's invited him, so he lost his income. And so he didn't have any ways to get his food. And so for that reason, like he had nothing to do. And so the person who's making this happen is Milarepa. And so he tried to give Milarepa poison, actually on several different occasions, but Milarepa wouldn't accept the poison. And one day what he did was, there was a girl who had leprosy. This is actually, that time it was a very bad disease. So she was probably sort of a leper woman. And he gave her she said, I'm going to give you a turquoise. Now, at that time in Tibet, it was considered a really valuable thing. It's kind of as valuable as gold. When Tibetans would go to India, they had to trade turquoise in Greece. And so they considered that the gold and they trade the turquoise for gold. And so they considered the turquoise because it's valuable as gold. And so this leper, no one really took care of the lepers. And so she had a very bad life. And this girl said, okay. He said to this girl, I'm going to give you this turquoise, but beforehand, you have to go give this offer this yogurt to Milarepa. And so this leper accepted this, and she went to Milarepa, and she had this like, and without the leper knowing, she had the Bumbo had put the shaman had put poison in this, and so the leper went, and she came to give the yogurt to Milarepa, and Milarepa kind of like opened his eyes wide, and he was looking, kind of staring. Then he thought to himself, oh, I'm going to eat this so that you can get the turquoise. So that I'm going to eat this so you'll get the turquoise. But he didn't say anything else. He just said, I'll take this. And then he had all of the yogurt. And after he'd had finished the yogurt, then what he said is, oh, sorry for you, poor thing, you're in such a terrible state. But I'm a yogi who has abandoned ego clinging for my body. This has been a long time. So I have no thought that this is mine. It's been a long time since I've thought that way. So because so any harm that you do is not going to harm me. And any harm you cause my body is not going to harm me. So this will not cause you not have any misdeed or cause any ripening. But if you it's not right for you to use this cup and anything. And so he cleaned this, and he cleaned it so it's very clear, and then gave it back to the woman. Instead, if she had any of it, she would have died, right? And so MIKYÖ just said, I don't want this. And so he cleaned at this and cleaned it out nice and clean, and they gave it back to the leper. I think it was probably a leper woman, and so he gave it back to her. And so because of this, then Milarepa got sick. And he got sick. And it's kind of a bad sickness. And so all of his students, the repas, and they all got really upset, and they all were really, and they all began to weep. But Milarepa at this point sort of looked up in the sky with his eyes, and he sang a song. And the main point of the song is that may all the illnesses and spirits and misdeeds and obscurations, whatever they are, they're for us yogis, for all the practitioners. They're like jewelry for us. They're like ornaments for us. And they make us better. They make us more valuable. So they become a situation for us to improve. And so then he made the aspiration that the Bumpo would be freed from his evil intentions, and that the woman would be freed from all her problems. But Milarepa said the song, but none of the Repas at this point knew that Milarepa had been poisoned. They didn't know that someone else had given him poison and taught him. So the Milarepa didn't tell them. But the night after the Bumpo was the night that the Milarepa was poisoned, the Bumpo was punished by the Dakinis and he died. And so when he heard that the Bumpo had been killed, he sang a song. And the main point of the song is that the Bumpo he had a really evil intentions, a poor guy, but he died before me. Actually, he thought I was going to kill him, but he died first. This is a very bad situation. May all the virtue and happiness all the virtue I accumulated in the 3 times, and all the happiness, and may all the virtues of happiness, I dedicate this all to purify the Bumpo's misdeeds. And also, I want to take all the Bumpo's suffering, and I'll take it upon myself so that I can purify him of it. And may in all times and all situations, it may never meet negative friends. May he meet virtuous friends. And so when you have when he said it, may never have any inappropriate thought to any sentient beings. And so this way he made the aspiration and sang the song. And when he said this, then there was Drigung Repa, one of Milarepa's students named Drigung Rinpoche, and he said, made the aspiration and said, why are you praying for this Bumpo? He probably didn't know that the Bumpo had given Milarepa the poison. And at that point, Milarepa said to Drigam Repa, oh, that Bumpo in the past killed a lama. So that lama, and because he's killed a lama in the past, he's going to the lower realms. There's the danger that he'll go to the hells. It's likely that he'll go there. So this is what Milarepa said. Then when he said this, so whether the killing a lama is about the Milarepa or about some other lama that he might have killed in the past before poisoning him, but Drigam Rinpoche said, Drigam Rinpoche at that point asked and said, so you knew that the Bumpo was giving you poison, so why did you take that Bumpo? So if you knew it was poison, why did you take it? And Milarepa said that I thought that if I took a prayer, then I would be able to take it and be able to pray that it would liberate him. And so when Milarepa was asked, is it possible that it'll liberate him? And Milarepa said it probably is. For something like Milarepa, whether or not he had been poisoned or not, when it came to the time he was passing away, then there's basically no difference whether he'd been poisoned or not from his own perspective. But in order to guide that poison, he drank the poison willingly or knowingly. And so what I think about this is that even when other people have an evil intention towards you and harm you, he would do whatever he could to help them, and not just the temporary benefit, but also try to make it into a way to bring them ultimate benefit. And so this is the type of great good deed that Milarepa did. And so these are things that we also really need to study and learn from ourselves. So I think that that is enough for today. Now we will have the dedication prayers.